Way. Receive 20 stars.
I'm gonna do my best to not imitate any sounds today.
Yeah, that's cap. It's happening.
It's so hard not to.
We can't help it. You already know that.
I already heard that. Get a 2.
Say positive affirmations.
I swear to God. Okay, this is 3 8s in a row. If I get a 1,
Game's racist.
I don't know. 5 coins.
nah, you're pretty close to the star.
Man, if you don't drop a
I'm gonna add some sound effects to this right here.
What?
Ew. Oh, hell no.
I definitely want an ASMR.
That's a caller.
10! This game gotta be
Big
racist.
boy bucks, big boy bucks.
Oh yeah, again.
I put it in. I put it in, man.
Put it in.
Because why spend so much time buying virtual property when you could be buying real property?
Oh my God.
Sigma grind set, bro. Think about it. Commentate L right here.
And now I am absolutely broke.
Broke is just a mindset, Grizzy. Shut up.
True.
Actually not wrong.
Alright.
And I hate y'all.
If you think you're rich, you're rich.
Sugma.
Jump up. What is this Fall Guys game mode? Can I go where Toad is?
Yeah, jump up. Go ahead, jump that way.
Flatten your ass. Oh, mama! Man, you know what's crazy about this right now? If I didn't reset the game, you know, this wouldn't be happening right now.
Yeah, you know, I wouldn't be broke. I wouldn't have had to walk past the star.
Yeah, Grizzy's literally going through it all because you reset.
Someone had to suffer on my account.
Yeah, and of course it had to be me, you know what I'm saying? Yeah.
Hey, don't blame me, blame the game. It picked you to be last.
Monkey. No.
White people when they run out of insults.
Unreliable.
Oh, we've already gotten all reliable before.
That is still the
Most out-of-pocket
for real.
thing I've ever heard.
Yeah, no, that's still my favorite clip. I don't even know what what the argument was about. That just goes, "Shut up, you're black."
Yeah, that's a thing.
Oh yeah, that was the thing in Mario Party.
That's Mario Party. I don't blame Matt for Mario Party. Just brings it out of people, you know.
Every white person's racist until they're racist.
Insert grandpa emoji.
Strangle me with a truly freeze pop rapper.
Yeah, teach me young. Man, what you got for me?
Star.
There's nothing really great.
Man, I wish.
I will say a warp block can be really helpful because if you go past the star and buy it, you can then use the warp block to warp the star behind the star.
That's true. That's true. This is a real small map, so I'm gonna take your advice and then like not listen to it. I did take it into consideration though.
All right,
Everyone go right in the middle.
everybody go for right in the middle.
Whoa!
Pavor!
Vinny, stop it!
I'm sorry, my friend. Boy.
Hey, watch where you
Why don't we just all? Hey, truce! Why don't we all just chill? 40 seconds. 40. Just chill. And we can all win 10 coins. 10 coins. We can all win 10 coins. I think so. We can all win 10 coins.
Stop! Chill.
Swear to God.
Grizzy, you were like, oh, what's he doing?
Yeah.
Stop. That's actually fucked. I mean, to be fair, Grizzy kept going for people and yelling, "This is war." So
I kept yelling stop, but I kept going for people.
Yeah, I saw, yeah.
we could have all won 10 coins, bro.
Man, I'm gonna make it out the hood one way or another. I don't give a fuck.
Yeah, just in case you roll that one, huh?
Struggle just makes the right.
Yes, Smitty, exactly. That's why I did it. That is why I used the mushroom.
No way.
Gotta play smart, damn it.
A literal 1 of 10 chance.
It's because I said it.
I can't wait to rob y'all motherfuckers. That's the only way I'm gonna make it
You didn't
out.
buy this. You didn't buy
this
the.
map.
You didn't buy the secret Glock from the item shop. You already missed out.
You don't know what that shit's up my ass. It's in my prison wallet.
Hell yeah.
Oh my god.
Wait, was that you or Donkey Kong?
Like,
What the-
Yeah, I'm just.
That was me.
Oh, time to get high.
All right, 9. This is bigger wanted.
Wait, what?
9.
What?
Toad, I would like to see your black market selection of items,
I
please.
don't want to buy anything because I don't have money.
Where's the bullet bill?
Oh, hell. It just goes around the map in an instant.
What? Wait, what? What? I forgot the...
What did you do?
Yeah, this motherfucker robbed you.
Oh, which nut do I take?
Is you landing on Bowser?
Nah, the big nut on the right.
Does that look like Bowser to you?
Yeah, each of these
Bowser
are
right here somewhere?
Bowser's
Why the hell Greasy giving
He's
you
on the
nuts?
other side.
And if
Man, that is
Bowser's
not me.
flower can come out.
I'm not the Goomba.
You should have picked the
not a
almond.
Goomba.
Oh no!
Hey, congratulations, Snowglove.
I would have picked the
No!
That was better than any commentary that could have been given.
No. I want that bass boosted. Grizzy, wherever you choose, don't listen to Puffer. That's the only advice.
Grizzly, you wanna listen to me?
Jesus.
What? Done.
Pick the long one. Yeah, pick the long one.
That's the almond, bro. Pick the almond.
Nah, my gut's telling me this one.
That's the.
Nah, you don't want that one. Nah, I told you pick the long one.
I gotta listen to this dummy.
Free
Dummy
star.
never did me wrong. Yo. You know what I'm saying? This dummy never did
Oh,
me
you
wrong.
want to go to Bowser?
Now, hold up. Now, can I get my fucking cash back, bitch?
Nope.
Capitalism.
Takes your money.
Oh, shit. I can't even. Looks like you don't have enough coins. Yeah, because your boy just robbed it.
Everybody working together
It's
against
all a
me.
setup, man. It's like the government.
Taxes, bro. Taxes.
Something would happen that would cause one of the twins to cease their formation. The strange thing is, we aren't 100% sure how this works exactly. There are a few ideas, like some sort of vascularity issue within the mother or nutritional issues of developing 2 fetuses. These are all hypothetical solutions to the question. Ultimately, however, one twin will be straight up absorbed by either the other twin, typically early on, but now there have been cases where fully formed legs, genitalia, arms, etc. have grown out of the other twin. But even with this, there is no movement or control from the dominant twin, indicating that while this area continues to grow, the parasitic twin is long gone. But that's the key here. When the parasitic twin is absorbed by the dominant, that's the end of them. Or likely they already met their end, and that's why they're essentially being consumed by the mother's body, the placenta, or other twin. Where I believe the misdiagnosis comes from is the part right here. We see with Gabriel, he's very clearly functional to a degree using his underdeveloped arms, conscious as much as Madison is, and capable. Maybe a little too capable as the movie shows, but capable nonetheless. This would completely change the diagnosis of the two, resulting in a new classification, at least new when applied to them. They're simply conjoined twins, which would imply that Dr. Weaver, who received an excellence in surgery or science award, whatever the crap that was, is actually a friggin' butcher. Can you imagine just cutting off one of the conjoined twins and being like, well, the other one gets to live. Sorry about you, dude. Like, that's just completely crappy. So now there's no denying Gabriel is, not the easiest thing to look at in the world, and this would clearly forever and always change the way Madison's life would progress, having her bro hang out on her back and top of her head. But the issue is the fully formed consciousness. This designation means that when both were forming in the womb, they never split into 2 fetuses and then Gabriel was reabsorbed. Instead, much like with conjoined twins, a zygote would fail to separate after 13 days. When this happened, the body would remain physically joined. We know with some conjoined twins, and specifically with Gabriel and Madison, or Emily if you want to call her that, they can join ventrally, laterally, and dorsally, with these 2 split, specifically dorsally. The terms to explain their fusion would be rachipicus, or the vertebral fusion above the sacrum, and craniopicus, or the skull fusion. Essentially, as they went to part ways, their backs would remain joined together and would not progress past this point. Now, there's only so much room in a conjoined skull, unfortunately, so as their brains began to form, they would form together. But the issue would arise during this formation. It's no secret that Gabriel is the underformed twin. Because of this, it would use Madison's formation information as more of a scaffolding for his own brain, which as a result would mean that Madison's brain would be set up with all the typical lobes and connections that one would expect, but would have an unfortunate link to Gabriel. So with all the standard lobes there, with the frontal lobe existing much like it should be normally due to proximity with the parietal regions, filling in as normal, joining them, there would however be issue with the back of the skull and the tissue associated with it. This is likely where a few changes will begin happening, which will also explain Gabriel's mannerisms to a degree, or at least his abilities. Likely the skull of Madison and Gabriel, having been joined, would be marginally larger than a standard adult female, and likely larger still than a male's. Because of this, more room for brain matter would exist, which means Gabriel's brain likely was grown into a degree as well. And judging by the shape of Gabriel's forehead, we could assume again some brain formation, but more importantly, we can assume this based on his goals and planning. While seeming a little rough around the edges, this planning would require likely a frontal lobe due to higher cognitive thoughts such as problem solving, planning, organizing, and thinking. However, remember the scaffolding I was talking about earlier. This is what I believe is the intrinsic link together. With the frontal lobe intact and relatively functional, this means that Gabriel is aware that he's alive and a being. Because of this, he would be capable of conscious thought and understanding. He would, however, also require the use of Madison's neurons for sensory information and likely memories. But more importantly, he would need the usage of her occipital lobe. Madison and Gabriel would likely use the same occipital lobe to some degree. We can see that even though Gabriel's eyes appear a little underdeveloped, they do work as clearly he can see and hunt the general area for whoever he's trying to take down. His own optic nerve would likely have less distance to travel, and this may be why he's able to react quicker as there's less distance, although it would be negligible. But he uses Madison's brain and likely his own neurons, which have fused into this area to determine visual information. But this likely is how he'd be able to also keep Madison contained if need be. We know from what the doctor has said that Gabriel was capable of placing Madison in a sort of stasis. In her mind, she was still going about her daily routine or sitting in a jail cell, when really she was actually just being stomped out. Gabriel would take over during times of extreme physical duress. When this would happen, Madison was placed in a sort of dreamlike state, but the question is how? Well, it appears to me this would not have been easy, and likely as a child it wasn't even possible. But let's be real here, it's likely not possible anyhow, and that's what this channel's for. The context clues given to us throughout the movie is that Gabriel was using the fetuses located within Madison in a way that would grow his own body back. Now obviously this is ridiculous, potentially. We know in the fetuses there's a fair amount of stem cells, and that's maybe what they were going for. Which, let's go over that for a moment. A stem cell is essentially a cell that can become any cell that we may program it to be or place it near that it'll take on those traits. Because remember, all of our cells have the same DNA barring mutations, and whether it be a skin cell, an endothelial cell, a neuron, an immune cell, a muscle cell, they're all the same cell. They have just differentiated. This differentiation allowed for multicellularism and for us to be as we are, because without it, we would simply just be a blob of cells. The stem cell is the precursor to differentiation. With certain genes switched on and others switched off, it can virtually become any cell within your body, which obviously makes it highly interesting, seeing as ailments within our bodies potentially attack specific cells that would be critical for our survival and could possibly take us out of the game. So let's say you take a stem cell and place it in the muscular system of the body with someone who has muscular dystrophy. Not only can it help with dystrophin, but it can help rebuild the area and convalesce it to the point that it effectively limits the progression of the disease. In other areas concerning injuries to the spine, by differentiating the stem cells actually into nervous system tissue, the damage to the spine could be effectively repaired, which in turn may allow someone to walk once more as the gap is bridged and signals can be sent to walk, along with sensory information can be sent back through the spine up to the brain. Stem cells are likely the future, but obviously the issue is, or at least the issue with the thinking is, that stem cells can only come from fetuses. The reality is adults have stem cells in their bodies that we can really access and utilize, but it's become something of a taboo as of late to experiment and test on this because of the place that people have been told stem cells come from. Likely we will get past this eventually, but for now, relating it to Gabriel, this is likely what he's doing with the unborn children within Madison. As the fetus grows, he would begin stealing stem cells from it to fuel his own growth. Eventually, this would put too much strain on the child, resulting in its end, but leaving Gabriel a little stronger than he was before. Now, clearly, where this would need to go is the actual neural capacity of Gabriel. Likely between the frontal lobe and Madison's occipital lobe, there would be a disconnect as the brain is totally separated from Madison's brain, or too largely separated, and there's very few connections apart from just the optic nerve that likely runs to this lobe. However, try as you might, you can't communicate with your occipital lobe, can you? I know, it's annoying, right? You have to just do it passively by looking around. But that's kind of what Gabriel would be experiencing when trying to interact with Madison's brain. So this would be the hurdle Gabriel would need to overcome if he was able to take control of Madison, and this is why it took so long. 20 years, in fact, or a little over 20 years. As the stem cells were directed north, eventually a small connection would form between Gabriel's frontal lobe and likely the back of the parietal lobe, as well as Madison's occipital lobe. Once connected, Gabriel's thoughts would start trickling into the brain of Madison. Now, it could be argued that this is how it always was, as when he would call Madison on the phone as a child or take control of her. But as her brain continued to grow, eventually Gabriel would lose this fleeting control over her until she started getting pregnant. Once getting pregnant, this was Gabriel's chance to exercise control once more, to grow his own meat suit within Madison and form stronger connections. But the next question is, how would this be possible? Once enough of a connection was established, Gabriel could influence directly how her brain was functioning by using his own brain to think. Because of the newly formed connections between the frontal lobe and the occipital, it's a little hard to imagine as none of our brains really work this way. But I believe conscious thought would have more of an impact on the actual visual interpretation due to the functionality changes in the occipital. By imagining a scene and keeping that in his mind, Gabriel could trip the connections in the occipital lobe, making Madison essentially hallucinate. Now, a few episodes ago, we talked about visual hallucinations and how the neurons actually need to be in a depressed state and not communicating as much for visual hallucinations to actually present. But with the Madison-Gabriel connection, I believe it may work a little different. So I want you to close your eyes and imagine a room. It could be any kind of room you want. In the far left corner is a red couch. To the right of it is a lamp, and there's a rug in front of it. Now, likely, you aren't in a room like this, but you essentially just created a mental space out of nothing due to your neurons firing. You didn't see it, but you imagined it. I would suggest this is how it's happening with Gabriel. You can even do the same thing by keeping your eyes open if you really wanted to. You are still taking in visual information readily, but you can still imagine a place despite it not existing within your reality. So I think we kind of all get it by now, but I believe at its core, this is how Gabriel influences what Madison sees. This is why occasionally when her eyes are open, she can kind of see what's going on, or sometimes Gabriel's vision actually trips her occipital lobe into interpreting what he's doing, which superimposes over the false reality that she's currently existing in. And this bleeds over and indicates that the connection between neurons has grown much more robust. So I'm going to actually do something here that I haven't done in a while and dedicate just this next part to dunking on this movie, because what in the sweet hell is this? Okay, so we know neurologically there's a connection here, but can someone explain what is going on with the electricity and how it's able to utilize radio waves? I mean, I'm gonna explain it to you, but what? So we see it has an influence on the electricity wherever it goes, right? And I know a lot of people are coming here wanting me to explain that, and I mean, I'm going to take a crack at it, but I have to warn you, not only does it make zero sense, it's incredibly dumb. I think Gabriel must be like a supervillain, but we hear Madison say Gabriel makes her stronger, and when he does take over, he literally dislocates her arms in order to use them properly. Otherwise, the physical connection between the joints would stop him from achieving any sort of meaningful moves. But somehow, Gabriel appears to be able to control the electricity in the area, which I also believe may be related to muscle strength that he contains. By having this higher affinity for electricity production, he could, in theory, increase the strength of muscular contractions, but not in a way that we would think. Normally, an electrical impulse is sent via motor neurons to contract muscles in a controlled and steady manner. Gabriel, the movements do seem a little more jerky and powerful, and this is, I believe, connected to the ability to influence electricity, which Madison is able to access in the interrogation room to blow out the lights. Let's start by saying, yes, this is stupid. Now that that's out of the way, this would require the formation of an entirely new organ in the body. Well, technically 2 new organs. And for that, we would have to probably borrow this idea from electric eels for inspiration on how this may be possible. We know that Gabriel is screwing around with neurons. I think I've probably driven that point into the ground. So what do neurons actually use to communicate? Well, neurotransmitters and electricity in its most basic form. A jump to a new form of cells known as electrocytes, which are derivatives of neurons, would be something needed for Gabriel to function the way he does. Electrocytes are disc-shaped electricity-producing cells where the inner periphery is negatively charged and a potential difference of just under about 100 millivolts relative to the deeper portions of the cell interior, which have more potassium ions, making it positively charged. When a shock command is issued, low electrical resistance develops between one side of the cell and the interior until eventually this results in a shock being delivered that is sent from cell to cell to cell, which can deliver either a large shock in the hunter's organ, at least in eels, or a smaller one in the sacs organ concerning communication. With electric eels, this is how they navigate murky waters and communicate, sending out small little shocks to let others know to either stay away or that they are there. When hunting, they let out one larger, more powerful shock to mobilize prey in the area so that they can be sucked in via the mouth and eaten. For any of this to make any sense whatsoever, Gabriel would need to develop these organs, which is not entirely impossible, just exceedingly unlikely since our genetic coding likely doesn't have any information on how to actually build the cell. Plus, even if it did, you're talking about Gabriel somehow unlocking this on a genetic level, which I'm afraid not. But then, there were actually a lot of stupid things in the movie that made me kind of scratch my head, which I will complain about in a second, but let's say for a moment that somehow Gabriel was able to obtain these organs or get them built from the stem cells from the fetuses, and likely still also had maybe a version of it when he was younger. This allowed him to contract the muscle with more force, making her stronger as a child, strong enough to throw adults around, break arms, and in general overpower humans. This would be the activation of the hunter's organ. But this is really not all that surprising. I've said it before that our bodies contain way more strength than we actually think they do. If every muscle in your body pulled in the same direction, you could lift around 25 tons, and that's in all of us. By contracting the muscle with more force, we could break bones, damage muscle, but in turn, produce way more strength than what would seem normal for the frame of a person. That's why Gabriel's motions always seem jerky and in some cases seemingly faster, as he's not sending information for the muscle to contract so much as he's literally just electrocuting certain portions of it, causing it to contract more forcibly, and as a result, make Madison stronger and faster than you would expect just by him taking over. And this may be why the police had trouble actually winging Gabriel in the police station. Not only is the optic nerve shorter, but he would also have access to this physical organ. Because after Gabriel is contained, remember, she still has access to these neurons that he had as well in the end that made her stronger, but she didn't have the jerky movements, meaning that likely she didn't have full access, and by locking Gabriel away, a portion of that organ would be lost as well, or a portion of both organs. The sax organ, or the lower voltage organ, would likely be what's used to communicate. Just like with electric eels, who send out the low levels of voltage into the environment, it's going to be interpreted as communication. With the low level of voltage sent out, you think that's odd for something to do in the air? Let's say just look at lightning, but an even better example would be a car battery, as it does push out a small electrical current through the air. If you didn't know, it's just pretty much negligible. If you released its voltage, it could potentially arc. Gabriel is able to communicate via electricity with the same method by putting out low voltage and affecting the microphones of radios and phones to communicate. When Madison became angry, she can't control it as much and ended up probably using the hunter's organ and then forced the electrocytes to fire likely all at once, which blew out the lights behind her. This would have likely activated Gabriel's almonds, which is why he called shortly after, as also in his best interest, because if they release Madison, they release him too. Of course, after being put in the cell, this would mean that the plan would need to change and she would have to break out in order for him to complete his work. But I did want to bring to your attention just two things that this movie had to offer. Now, don't get me wrong, it was a cool concept, just kind of stupid. First, the doctor literally cut off a conjoined twin and removed the body but left the brain and then just pushed the face into the skull. Why? I mean, I know brain surgery is likely a little difficult, but why did you leave the eyes and the face? Would it have really been that difficult to cut off? And the second, just absolute, why was this even added? Remember before Husband of the Year got to see what his back looked like firsthand? Why did the couch undepress itself like a ghost? I still don't get that. Unless Gabriel at this point was forcing Madison to see things and didn't want her to see herself. But if it was from that perspective, when Gabriel was sitting on the couch, she did see the back of her head. But then how did Derek not notice it when he flipped on the lights? This part bugged the crap out of me when I saw it in theaters because it clearly says that it's a ghost. But then it turns out to be your mutilated conjoined twin. Like, bro, what?
As an American, I'm always wondering what the Ruskies are up to over there. Oh, okay. So pretty much an average day, I imagine. But prior to this horrifying reality, which kind of seems tame compared to the bad timeline we currently are on right now, in 1983, during the last major close call to our planet becoming a glass field, 2 cosmonauts were sent into space for an exploratory measure, were then returning home and were fairly jazzed about the idea. Shortly before their descent back into Earth's atmosphere, they would realize something was on the hull of their ship, which would go on to break in and then infect one of the crewmates after attacking the other. After being picked up by the Russian government shortly after making landfall, it would become apparent that one of the cosmonauts was much more of a security risk, as the other appeared to be worm food anyways. So today's episode, we'll talk about what this creature that landed on the hull is, how it interacts with the human endocrine system, and why, as always, everything appears to want to go for the brain when it comes to people. I'm just guessing something about the human brain must be pretty delicious. Okay, so before we start, I have finally moved, and I have an area to stream in so that you don't have to see the hundreds of coffee cups I have on my desk. It's pretty sweet. You can find me on YouTube under Roanoke Games, and also on the Purple channel under Roanoke Games. I know, very original. So it should be pretty fun. I'm just gonna play horror games basically, because that's what I like to do. Or maybe even World of Warcraft, because I'm a giant nerd. Alright, so we all know the drill by now, but for any of the new people on here, there'll be a timestamp up on screen. If you want to bypass the summary of the movie, then head there. there, and we will get into the actual biological reasons for the attack patterns and target of this creature, as well as its physical morphology. But considering the movie was released on demand, like in Russia in 2020, because the entire world was getting screwed to the wall, odds are you might not have seen it. So if you haven't, definitely go check it out. It's actually a pretty good movie. But for all those others sticking around, let's get into why when you find an alien creature, as always, your first instinct should not be to poke it and see if it's friendly. Again, as with the blob, ignore that 8 portion of your brain that says, yes, 3 Ooga Doogas with a long stick should suffice. So we start off our story, and I'm going to sound like CinemaSins, but holy lord, there are so many production companies associated with this. Like everyone and their cousin was in on it. So we start off with 2 cosmonauts returning back to Earth. One is singing nonsense, their words not mine, and they are on their way back to Earth. Detaching from their craft and heading towards home, they begin to talk about what they're going to do once they get there. One mentions how he's going to go take a shower, and he keeps mentioning his wife, so we all really know what he's going to go do. And the other says that he's heading to, and I'm going to butcher this because, you know what, I just don't speak Russian, Rostov, to attend some business. But he's really just mega vague about it. As they begin their descent process, they get knocked slightly off course for some reason, but are able to recover. Why were they knocked off kilter? Well, as they discover, one of the cosmonauts then looks over and sees something out the window. And then as the other looks, he catches a glimpse of it. As it heads up to the hatch on the pod, it begins opening it. As they slowly drift down into Kazakhstan, which I have to point out, it said multiple times that they crash landed, which, I mean, to me, looks like a picture-perfect landing. I mean, maybe they were off course, but I wouldn't call that even remotely a crash landing, right? Anyhow, they are found by a local on a horse. As he approaches, he spots one of the cosmonauts seemingly ended, with the back of his head bleeding pretty profusely. As he approaches the other cosmonaut, he sees that he's retching near the re-entry capsule. He turns around and shows that his eyes have turned black or even just bloodshot, and his mouth is covered in blood, as well as many grievous wounds, indicating that, you know, something probably isn't right here. We now head over to meet Dr. Tatiana Klimova, and I am literally just copying what they said, so, accent aside, currently at a review board meeting. She apparently held some kid underwater for a minute to cut off air to his lungs in order to help with his sickness. Now, I'm sure there's a reason for this, but it might just be my perspective as a former lowly scientist. But what? Anyhow, they present her with a choice. Admit what you did was dumb and take a slap on the wrist, or continue to defend your actions like a stubborn mule and have your medical license revoked. Well, we all know how this is going to go, choosing the path of most resistance, so she says that she did the right thing, and said that nobody else would do what needed to be done. Okay, as a side note, I really wish they'd give us more clues as to why the 17-year-old had to be held underwater for a minute. I mean, they mentioned he had psychogenic seizures, but couldn't they have just told him to hold his breath normally or something? I really don't understand what depriving him of oxygen for a minute would even do. If you know what she was trying to accomplish with this, let me know in the comments because I'm at a slight loss. Anyhow, Communist Big Brother is watching from above because her answer really is seals her fate. Sort of. Basically, she's not leaving this story as a single carefree person. You'll see what I mean later. So now we meet Colonel Simdarov. Don't make fun of me, Russian pronunciations are not my thing. That'll be the last time I mention that. It's like the letters don't actually make the sounds that you think they would. So he talks to her and tells